Our first speaker this evening is Belyndar Rikimani, who's 23, who actually, is it 3 a.m. with you now, Belyndar?
It's 2 a.m. It's 6+2 in the morning.
2 a.m. So thank you so much for waking up just to speak to us. And we heard you've got an exam later on in the morning, so wishing you very best of luck for your exam. Belyndar is Vice President of the Pacific Islands Students Fighting Climate Change and a young climate activist from the Soloman Islands. Belyndar is deeply involved in climate justice advocacy at national, regional, and international levels, and is a strong advocate for equal participation of women, children, and the marginalized groups in climate action. Belyndar is currently co-leading a pilot project recruiting young Pacific leaders into climate diplomacy, initiated by the Pacific Islands Climate Action Network. So without further ado, over to you.
Yes, so I will just give you guys a brief of what's happening here in the Pacific now, and just to show you what we're actually doing before, coming in preparations lead up to COP, and why civil resistance is very critical for Indigenous people. Basically, because like here in the Pacific, there's a lot of Indigenous people that we have, and there's so many things we're campaigning for to protect our, our islands, our livelihood, our people, and why we think that, people in the climate movement in the global north, they really need to step up to really help us push for climate justice in the lead up to COP26. Yeah. So here in the Pacific now, there's so many things that's happening. We have been actually trying to coordinate a lot of connections with our CSO group, civil society groups, other youth groups, and also try to bridge a lot of networks with not just around the Pacific, but also in the international level, like we're doing now, is to talk out, get the stories out, and actually see that we're on the same page moving forward to COP26. Yeah. Here in like for us in the Pacific, it's always been, we don't have that much how can I say, that much energy that we need to actually share what we are facing here on the international level. We've been going up with the same story, sharing the realities of how climate crisis has really affected us, but yet there is very little implementation of what that has been shared on international platforms in our countries. We've seen in a lot of conferences that has happened, all our world leaders have gone up there, especially our leaders, saying such nice words about implementing things for climate change, cutting carbon emissions, pushing forward for the objectives that were being in the Paris Agreement. Yet nothing had actually implemented in our homes. Now we're facing the worst effects of climate crisis, like sea level rise is affecting our people every day. People are relocating from their homes. They're losing their identities. Our ancestral places that hold really important, importance to our families, to our tribes, to our islands, are being taken away by the impacts of climate crisis. So we are facing the worst impacts, and there's the level of energy that we have now. It's like we need an urgent action. We need an urgent change, not just from our leaders, but also from you guys that are up there in the that has high power to actually push for something, because you guys don't face what we face. We are facing the worst of our life, and we're doing this because our generation, our future generation, are at stake. We are facing the worst impacts that could actually take our future away. So it's very now it's very critical, it's very vital to actually share the word out and make sure that we're on the same page, because we've seen that we are all in this together, whether you're far or whether you're near us. we are doing this for a common good, and that is for our future generation. So that's why we see that, for us to be together in this climate space and share the same song and same, it's very important that we make sure that we have you guys seeing our story, sharing our story, and empowering others of what we have so that we could build from there and actually share that same momentum towards COP26. And here in the Pacific, one of the civil resistance that we're actually doing for indigenous people is like we're kind of focusing on giving the voice on issues that are surrounding global climate change in terms of oceans. Yeah, we're trying to, because our oceans is one of the things that to us, for us Pacific Islanders, we're very very connected to our environment. Our environment holds so much for us, and to see it being washed away or see it being destroyed by human-induced climate change and all those things that we have, haven't done too much about it or haven't contributed too much about it, is it's heartbreaking for us. So that is why we're standing here, and we're standing in support, like to share out the same song, and that we need you, we need you, we need your voice, we need your action, we need your solidarity to actually do this together, because ourselves we can't do it alone. Having the little population that we have, and we've been to COP, we've been to a lot of international arenas already sharing the same thing, but nothing has happened. It's always been the same thing for us, and we're at a breaking point that we're tired of doing it, and we're reaching out to show that it's time that we stand up, and it's time that we show the leaders that the time to act now. It is time to act now. It is time that we act climate justice, because time is not on our side. We are living, for us Pacific Islanders, we see that we are living on borrowed time. So to actually make a difference for our people, we need to start now. And it doesn't, those targets that we do for 2013 or 2015, it's not going to help us. Whereas in the Pacific, it's not going to help us. We need actions that happens now, or in 10 years time. We need those type of actions. We don't need the targets that will wait for 2013, 2015. The more we wait, the more we're losing our lives, the more our future is being taken away from us. So we're here, and I feel like it's time that it's enough of we're actually begging for people to support us and sharing the same story, crying over and over spilled milk. Like, it's time that we stand, and we stand up and be strong and empower and have the confidence to show that we need each other to actually push forward and actually achieve what has been already been signed by our leaders on the Paris Agreement, and make it into action. Get those ambitious goals done, and have our people being able to be in the negotiation, not just the top leaders or the top politicians, but we are the ones that are actually facing the issues, be there guiding them, influencing the policies, and actually make a difference for our people. Yeah. So like, usually for us, when we say things, we don't want to talk about too much politics or negotiation, but what we want to do is to see more action, more implementation. It's time that we stop talking and actually become doers of the words that we've been trying to sing for a very long time. Yeah. So here in the Pacific, we're always up, standing up to support, putting our hands up for support and solidarity, and just actually see the work done, and enough of talking and talking and talking and nothing gets done. So I'm very happy to be here and to actually share a little bit of what's happening here in the Pacific with you guys, and actually see what you guys could do and actually help us move this forward in preparations for COP26, and actually achieve ambitious and sustainable goals that could actually help guide our future, sustain our future, in the long run. Let's not wait for 2013 or 2015. Let's do things now. Yeah, because what we do now matters for our future. So yes, that's what I wanted to share with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belyndar. That's really amazing to hear from you, and we really do stand with you, and we really are so tired of all these empty promises that keep getting given. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing so fully. Which island are you on in Pacific Islands?
I'm from the Solomon Islands, so it's if you see on the map, we're 3 hours away from Australia. It's a very tiny dot Pacific Island you can see on the map. So it's very tiny, yet we're here and we want to make a difference, and we're standing up to all these climate injustices and empty promises. So yeah.
Yeah. And good luck with your exam later today. We have Andrew Brant speaking next. Hi, Andrew. Andrew Brant is an experienced Indigenous activist from the Mohawk tribe in Canada. He is part of a long line of tribal leaders who have fought against the colonization and encroachment of their lands. Many campaigners have been initiated against the Canadian government, including opposition to the oil pipelines, and these have involved prolonged episodes of civil resistance. Andrew does regular podcasts and YouTube videos on these struggles and is involved in reaching out to create broader alliances on stopping environmental destruction in Canada. I'll pass to you, Andrew, to share your story.
Hey, Sego Seguego, Satagayanda Nyungets. I'm Satagayanda is my real name. Andrew Brant is my birth certificate name, I guess. I've been living this for my entire life. Civil disobedience has been at the core of who we are as Gunyakehaga people, as Haudenosaunee people, as the nations that are a part of that. What our whole entire idealism is based on is, we are one with nature. We balance each other out. We don't work against it. We work with it. And then the way that we operate is that everything is connected through spirituality, politics, traditions, ceremonies. Everything is all connected. So everything that we do is always immediate and is always based in our law. And it's been working for us for thousands of years. It's never been changed, and it's still working here to this day. So when I look at the way that non-Indigenous people go out as forms of civil disobedience and hold up signs and hold up and say chants is enough, because we as Indigenous people, we've been standing and putting our lives on the land. We've been there camped out in freezing temperatures. And if last year, in February of 2020, wasn't the call out to the entire world to do something, then I don't know what else it'll take. Because in February of 2020, it was the biggest economic shutdown in Canadian history. And it was because the Mohawks said, no, you can't pass through our land to the Canadian National Rail Line. So they decided that they would go get an injunction against us. They would lie to the police, they would lie to the judge, and they would, send people and actually close the rail line down. So they closed the rail line down, and then the police ended up coming and blocking the roads off, so no through traffic could go through, because we never actually closed anything down. So the way that the media had spun it was that we were domestic terrorists, when in fact it was the government that was shutting everything down because they were afraid of what we could do. So historically, where Mohawk territories are right now is actually in the center of where all the biggest military bases in the country are. And that's not by mistake. The capital of Canada is immediately outside the Mohawk territories, because they know what we can do. All of the pipelines go through Indigenous territories. All of the rail lines go through Indigenous territories. They used Asian people to build them. They used Black people as well. They used our lives. They killed us, raped us, murdered us to try to get them off. So we've been standing and putting our bodies on the line forever. Even with agreements, even with peace agreements, those had been broken. So ever since I was young. Like I grew up into this, and what we call ourselves as warriors, I guess, is what non-Indigenous people call us, but we call ourselves Rodi Skanagete. So if you look back into maybe European history, maybe with like crusades and stuff like that, how people are just born into war. That's what it's like here. We are born into an ongoing battle, and we're trained with peace, power, and righteousness of Guyana Goa, the great law of peace, which has been held for centuries, even despite colonization. So as we grow up learning that and understanding that, we can see what's going on around us and see the ongoing fight. We can see how many of our own family members, our women, go missing. They're murdered. Just anything like that. All of our descendants as Indigenous people have gone to residential schools. And now we've been telling people for years and years and years that there's mass graves at these residential schools. There's mass graves. And nobody was listening to us, and they would call us liars. They would tell us it never happened. They would even go as far as telling us that these places were good. And now, as of last week, they've uncovered over 1,700 bodies from mass graves from just 9 schools in Canada. So, us standing up and putting our lives out there, we continue to be silenced. People don't hear about these kind of things around the world, because there's literal legislation that comes out, like Bill C-10, which just came out. I had my platform removed because it was too anti-Canada. They said it was because it didn't have enough Canadian content, but that couldn't be further from the truth. It was all truth is what we put out. So even as I grew up and seeing this and learning the ceremonies and going through and watching what other people were doing, as allies, they didn't call themselves at that time like allies in the 90s. They didn't know, they were just protesters, right? So we would go out and try to educate these protesters. So we tried to stop a dump, but that ended up happening. We ended up stopping a dump that would pollute the river, and we live on one of the biggest watersheds in North America where we are. So it was imminent that we stopped that, because our whole existence depends on nature and water is life, so our whole being is to be able to put ourselves out there on that land, because we're made of that land. We're always a part of that. If you see any Indigenous people, they'll always have a connection to where they came from. They'll always want to go back and visit it, or they'll always want to go back and stay there, always. We don't have we have a different way of thinking. We can't just go move somewhere and stay there forever. The connection is way too strong. So when we go out there and we put our bodies on the line, we put our lives on the line, like we did in February 2020, or like we just did last year at 1492 Landback Lane, Mackenzie Meadows. Skylar Williams is, facing jail time. He's going to be going to trial. I was down there with him when it began. And, I saw that it was peaceful. There was nothing there but surveillance. And, the fact that they can spend $20 million on surveillance of Indigenous people, but not cough up 1.5 million to find all of the bodies of the children that are missing from these residential schools says a lot, So as we continue to put ourselves on the line, people wonder, why are you camping out there? Why are you going out there? Why don't you just go home? It's because we are home. This is where we are. This is where we come from. This is our land. This is literally our land, As Mohawks of Tyendinaga and Mohawks of Six Nations, we were pushed up from the United States. Our laws were stolen and manipulated to what is the American Constitution and everything like that. That's actually based on the Great Law of Peace the Haudenosaunee Confederacy had, that the Mohawks are actually the keepers of. We're called the keepers of the Eastern Door. So if anything comes in from the east that might destroy the peace of the land, it comes to us and we deal with it, which is why, the heavy military presence and political presence around where we are. Historically, the Mohawks were the ones that were the most feared. We were the first ones that accepted the Great Law of Peace because, we were politically and, military wise, the strongest, like most feared. because we were most passionate about what we stood for. And if we truly believed in it, then we would give our lives for it. So when the peacemaker came and he delivered that message of peace and, you know, really, really educated us, we took that and we delivered it to the rest of the 5 nations, which are now known as the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And so then that established thousands of years of ongoing, to this day, you know, processes that still work. What we do is so ingrained in us that people say, how do you guys mobilize so fast? How do you get around so fast? How is it possible that you can shut something down in a day and make it last for 3 months? You know, it's because we know what we're doing. You know, it's because we have the sense of community. We have the sense of relationship. We have the sense of, you know, understanding each other and our place in creation, our place in nature. Who are we, you know, but those insignificant caretakers of that. That's why we were put here. It says it in our creation stories. We were the last to be made because somebody needed to take care of this stuff, make sure it went on, you know, to be enjoyed for everybody. So when we put our bodies out there, we're literally putting ourselves on our own land. You know, we're not going anywhere. We're never going to go. And, you know, people need to understand that what non-Indigenous people do, what settlers need to do, is start utilizing their privilege for, you know, what they can, because it can be used. As Indigenous people all over the place in colonized places, we are literally written out of the legislation. There's laws against us. It's every single government is institutionally racist. You know, all of them are built against us. You know, like for example, we have the Indian Act here, you know, that prevented us from doing anything. I still have a card that has a number on it. I'm still just a number rather than it being tattooed on me. I have it on a card. So when it comes down to speaking out, they want us to be silenced. They want us to be quiet, and they want, you know, they don't want the rest of the world to hear about it. But when it comes to all of the colonized nations, everywhere that has been touched by it, you're going to see that, you know, it's the privilege that needs to be utilized, because we can stand up and we can say as much as we want, but then there's going to be legislation that's built against us. It wasn't just this past one, but there was also Bill C-15 that came out with the Harper government, and it said that anybody that stood up against the government was essentially a terrorist. You know, so what that does, it's basically aiming all of that legislation at people that are going to stand up against the government, the majority of those people being people of color. You know, it's so a way to throw us in jail, a way to put us under surveillance, a way to, you know, keep us under wraps. So when it comes down to it, you know, using your privilege to go into those institutions and start taking it down, dismantling it and saying you need to follow the agreements of the Indigenous people. You need to listen to the people of the community. You need to listen to the people, because it's not one person or 2 people or 10 people that are supposed to be running countries. It's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be the people. It's supposed to be the communities, because that's where the power truly lies. And when the people actually realize that they have the power, that they're the ones that hold that power and they can shut entire countries down, then things will change. When we have people that can go out there and stand with Indigenous people and say, I'm not moving, I'm here too, that's when things will change. When there's a real economic disruption, that's when things will change. When you shut it down so that non-Indigenous people will get fresh drinking water, you know, that was one of the things they started to complain about with us when we shut the country down. Well, what about our water treatment? Well, we're still under boil advisory, you know. So colonization kills. We need to look at traditional Indigenous governance, traditional ecological knowledge, and the way that we are able to stand up immediately and mobilize, because that's built into our laws. And if that can be implemented into any other kind of governance, the great law of peace, then I can guarantee that there would be a change. Now, we'll go for having me today.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we're totally honoured to hear your story, and you know, it's really helping me connect with the feeling that, you know, every new pipeline, every other degree added on to this temperature, every new meter of sea level rise, it's all these individual people, and connecting to your story is, yeah, really.
Sorry, can I just add as well? They just passed legislation that allowed for the old growth forests in British Columbia to be clear cut. So there's still Indigenous people out there fighting against that. So it's everywhere.
Yeah, I hope we can send, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We're joined also by Ina Maria Shikongo, who is an artist, fashion designer, and activist who celebrates the power of being an African woman every day, vowing to stop a planetary disaster. Ina Maria has rallied humans from across the world to stop a Canadian company from drilling for fossil fuels in her country, Namibia, upstream from the famed Okavango Delta. The Okavango Delta is home to some of Africa's most ancient communities and the largest surviving elephant population. Canadian oil and gas company Recon Africa has already begun exploratory drilling in the region, projecting a whopping 120 billion barrels of oil, enough to consume 1/6 of the world's remaining carbon budget, by releasing up to 51.6 gigaton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Ina Maria, thank you for joining us. I'll pass to you.
Hi everyone. Hi, I'm
Hey.
Ina. Hi, thank you for the introduction. I don't have to do it. People always ask me, when did I start becoming an activist? Like Andrew, I was also born in war. I was born in a refugee camp because my parents were fighting the apartheid regime that was in Namibia. We are from northern central Namibia, so right at the border. So my parents and other freedom fighters, they went to Angola and other African countries, Tanzania, where they were training soldiers that came to southern Angola to lead the resistance against the apartheid regime. So I grew up in a refugee camp. Well, I was born in a refugee camp in Angola. And then I grew up as a refugee in the former East Germany, and I came back after the wall fell. So Stefan, neem das Kind bitte. Sorry, my son just walked in. Okay, so what happened, sorry, always gets distracted when they're coming. But I grew up with freedom chants. I grew up being told to stand up against capitalism because we were caught in a Cold War. So the SWAPO, or the so-called terrorists at the time, SWAPO and the Plan movement, they were being supported by the communists, whereas the apartheid regime was being supported by the capitalists. So we were brought up to be anti-capitalist already from the time that we came out of our mother's wombs. And I always try to exercise my activism in my own way through my art, my poetry, through the actions that I did in the past and that we are still busy with, like trying to rehabilitate landscapes. We are trying to create school gardens, backdoor gardening projects for people that live in the most impoverished parts of the city, because food prices are going up. But all of these efforts, they keep on being undermined because poverty levels are going up. COVID-19 obviously made a lot of people unemployed, and right now businesses are closing down. Obviously, the COVID cases are going up like no one's business. We don't have enough vaccines. And anyway, the vaccines that we have, they are not approved by WHO. So some funny dodgy deal again. The person who's supposed to supply the hospitals with oxygen is actually a person that Recon Africa, this Canadian company, also hired as a media consultant, but he never delivered anything. So very funny dodgy things. So what Recon Africa currently is doing, they are drilling. They just got the ERA to do the 2D seismic tests in the Kavango Basin, which is going to be detrimental to the elephants, like no one's business, to the life. You know, we have a lot of animals that live underground, like the anteaters. It is going to be disastrous. We will not be able to stop it here. Our government is corrupt. I can share this document later, or this documentary on the fish rot, where you see how a company from Iceland, Samherji, embezzled or paid about $3 billion, I think it's US, $3 billion to politicians. We are a population of 2 million people. Poverty is going up. This company claims that they did everything according to the book. They got the license in 2015. They only started doing community engagement in 2021. That is not transparency. So now, even the Canadian government, because some of the rebels went to the Canadian embassy in London to protest several times, and they got an answer saying that this company is following government standards, but they're not. I mean, they have bought the government, clear. You know, this is the same government, by the way, that my father died for, because my father died when I was 2. He was killed in the war. We orphans, we never got anything from this government. The plunder is continuing. Lies are continuing. The governments are covering up everything. And for me personally, as someone who has been born in this instability, I really see it as it is going to be a genocide, another one. Germany just admitted that, well, they didn't really admit to the genocide that they did, because before the first concentration camp of the Germans was actually in Namibia. So even the same scientists that were working on the Namibian people also worked in Auschwitz and all of those, they were also working for the Nazis. So it started here. So now this company from Canada wants to repeat Canadian history of how they wipe out, indigenous people, like Andrew was just saying. So now they're doing the same thing here. We saw the ocean catching fire. If the ocean can catch fire because of a leak, imagine in our dry landscapes. We only have the rainy season from now it has been pushed back to January. We used to have a small, tiny rainy season in October, and then the rain will start from November to April. Now it is from January, and you are even lucky if you get more than 3 showers. Some parts of Namibia have not received any rain in more than 10 years because of climate change. So now imagine if we have a little leak, it is going to destroy everything. All of those homes are made out of vegetation. It is, we use what is around us. We don't use bricks and all of that. So this is an intentional genocide. The leaders are quiet because they have been bought. For me, what always makes me sad, like today they are celebrating, the 4th of July. It is Moskama, the Independence Day of the Americans. But in actual fact, it is the day that they celebrate, where they are proud of the genocide that they have caused. onto the indigenous people of the Americas. They are there talking about their empires that they have built. When you look at how the empires were built, they were built on the exploitation of people of those lands. Even here right now, the English, you know, they were here. They were the caretakers of Namibia. Yeah? Our diamonds are in your crown jewels. Were our people compensated for that? Never. Your companies, your governments, they don't see us as people. Our lives, they don't matter. That is why they keep on lying. They already knew in at the turn of the century that if they continue with these practices, that this is going to happen. So citizens of the countries where the polluters are coming from, you need to demand accountability from your governments. Even if they say that we did nothing wrong, let's go back to history. When you went to colonize who, what did you do? They killed a lot of innocent people. Today they call it development, but it is not development. It is neo-colonialism that is fueled by bribing and corruption. And on your side, it is illegal. Why is Justin Trudeau just quiet about this Recon Africa story? They have an office in London, there's no one. They have an office in Windhoek, there's no one. They have an office in Vancouver, there's no one. Now they even removed the office in Vancouver from the website because there are no people inside. They are scamming everyone. All the geologists are saying there's no oil in the Kavango. So are they trying to push up the stocks? We don't know. Irrespective of that, the damage is still continuing so the stock price can go up. And then at some point they leave, the damage has been done and there's nothing found. Who's going to lose? Namibia. We cannot deal with bushfires. We don't have the kind of fancy fire extinguishers that you do. We are not ready for it, but we have a lot of corrupt officials. That is what we have. And also your governments are also corrupt because they are turning a blind eye to this. They are turning a blind eye. If you look at the pipeline in East Africa that is being built, Total promised some of the farmers that they will get paid for the land where the pipeline is going to be on. People have moved until today, they have not been paid by Total. Until today. And Macron is just there smiling. This is the continuation of what has happened over 500 years ago. The same principles, nothing has changed. And any help coming from your side is going to be amazing. It is going to be great because this has to stop. You can see what is happening in Canada. Me, I was even thinking, is this karma? Why are they in Canada, you know? The Kavango Basin, they say that it is the birthplace of modern humanity, you know? And then we started spreading out. This is what the science says today. Whether it is true or not, it doesn't matter. But when I look at other indigenous nations, how they live in harmony with their lands or their practices, I can see that we are all connected. We have the same beliefs globally. But if you are coming here to hurt the birthplace of humanity, and now there you are there suffering from fire all of a sudden, the ancestors are working. They can have the power, they can have the money, they can bribe. I might not have anything. Yes, I put myself on the front line, but I know that I have the protection of the ancestors. And as long as I know I have that, I will not stop. So our governments, they need to realize that whatever is happening on your side, because even the UK is starting to dry out. You can see how we are suffering with food security. This is your future. This is your future. It is just a warning sign. This has to stop. Because if it doesn't stop, then humanity is going to end. Nature will continue, but humanity will end. Unfortunately, for us, it involves human rights violations all the time. You heard what Andrew said, what they go through. If we look at the Niger Delta, Ken Saro-Wiwa, we can look at Mafikile, who was gunned down last year. So we can look at all of the activists in South America that have been killed over the past year, including this year. So this is murder. Those companies need to be held accountable. You need to take your governments to court if that has to be. Producers of plastic wrappings, they need to stop it also. They need to find other alternatives because that is the cost. So we can buy all this junk all the time that does not even last a year. So everyone needs to be held accountable, from the government to the polluters to the producers, because they are getting the raw materials here for nothing. They're getting them for nothing. That is why you have children in Congo that are mining for you to have your latest iPhone. And the children in Ghana that are busy burning and recycling all of those electronics so you can have the latest gadgets. It is children on our side that are suffering while your children are playing. They have time to educate themselves, but ours, they don't have that privilege even because of the continuation of slavery. Yeah? And thank you very much for having me. I don't know if I went past the 15 minutes.
Thank you, Ina. Yeah, you wake us all up, make us realize we have to step into our power and we have to demand this accountability from our governments and call out this total corruption of this system. Yeah, thank you. Oh, Ina?
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing. I know that in most cases, these companies, they say that you European activists, you don't care about the development of our continents, which is actually also a greenwashing tactic. It is a greenwashing tactic. They were calling me a white activist myself. I can share the email with you. That is what they were saying about me. So they are saying it because it is just a greenwashing tactic. Because even for you yourself, you can say, hey, listen, Canada is on fire, man. We don't want the same here. So it is your human rights that is being inflicted on, because the science knew already back then that if they continue like this is going to happen. So it's a matter of really holding them accountable. And when it comes to playing this racial card, they're like, no. Canada is burning. It is right here. It has nothing to do with racism. But it is just a greenwashing tactic, and you should not let that intimidate you either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina. That's an important point. We are also joined by JLo from XR America, who is in Portland, and the temperature, the record-breaking temperature that's in Portland has been, all over the news. So I'll pass to you, JLo, to hear what's happening.
Yes, thanks very much. First, I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from our Indigenous brothers and sisters, because our press and our media are so monoclonal and so bastardized by corporate greed that we don't get to hear other voices oftentimes. So this is really beautiful, and I appreciate it a lot. I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been here for 34 years. I've worked in and out of climate since I was in university in the 80s doing atmospheric chemistry research. And I'm here to tell you that I love that we are together, because there's more and more people coming awake to what's going on. I've lived in Portland for 34 years. I came here to go to environmental law school. When I got out of school, the only people that were hiring were the government and Exxon. And so it was not a tenable thing. So in any event, I've been in and out of climate for a long time. And I've watched, as I've lived in Oregon for 34 years, the dramatic changes in the forest and the annual temperatures. When I first moved here, it was a lot like what I've been told Wales is like. It was, the Pacific Northwest is misty, cold, rainy, foggy all the time. And the heat has been changing the way we experience our own forests. So for example, I would tell you that, our summers, when I first moved here 34 years ago, would start in July. This is about when the summers would start. Our summers have grown by over 70 days in 34 years. It's remarkable how different things are. And what that has caused, it has caused a tremendous amount of shift in the animals, in the trees, in the forests, in the way that the fish are in the streams. Everything has changed. And it's happened so slowly that most people don't notice. But let me speak to the heat and to the fires. One example is that in all of last century, in Oregon, where I live, the state where I live, which is about the size of the United Kingdom, in Oregon, we had 6 mega fires, which is 100,000 acres in all of last century. Last year in 2020, we had 5 mega fires. It was a hellscape. There was an entire month where the sky was orange and ash was falling from the sky. And that was a precursor to what we've had happen this year, which is the giant heat dome that moved up from California into Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And so the fires have been increasing, the heat has been increasing. Typically, this time of year, we should be about 27 Celsius in Oregon and Washington and cooler in British Columbia. Instead, with the heat that we're having now, we've been in the 40s. So a radically larger heat amount that comes up from California and stays here. And in the last weekend, it was terrifying, the amount of heat. It was almost like a hellscape. The temperatures here in Portland, normally again around 27 for the high, we're in the 40s. We had 40, I think it was 45 here in Portland. Seattle had 42. In British Columbia, they had in the mid 40s, and even in a place called Lytton, British Columbia, they had 45, 47, and then 49 Celsius. So an unbearable amount of heat. And of course, you know, we are concerned for the animals and the living things all across the region, but it was most obvious for people. We have in Portland, we have 10,000 people who are homeless that live on the streets. They live in tents, they live in doorsteps, they live under bridges, they live in caravans and abandoned cars. Because of the dramatic effects of capitalism and inequality in our economy, so many people are homeless. And those people were experiencing unimaginable suffering, just panting and sweating. And at nighttime, the temperatures didn't get below 27 Celsius. So it was really quite warm at night as well. People couldn't cool their bodies down. As a result, in just a small region from Portland, Oregon, up through British Columbia, we've had over 500 deaths from just the heat alone. And you know, the thing is, if someone had come and murdered 500 people, it would be all over the world that there was this crazy thing happening. But instead, this creeping doom that we're experiencing, this creeping heat that we're experiencing, is killing people all over. And I'm just using this area as an example. It's happening all over the tropics and all over the world, but our example here is poignant because it's such a dramatic shift. And we've been warned by climate scientists for decades now of sudden, abrupt climatic events that will trigger tipping points. So part of, as I said, the fires here have been terrible, and they've been growing with increasing intensity and damage now as we approach the upward tick on the hockey stick, right? You know, the hockey stick curve with climate. So we are experiencing now these massive number of increased fires. They're larger, they're hotter, they're more pervasive. And this summer, we are now poised with the lowest amount of moisture in our forests in the Pacific Northwest ever recorded, with the earliest summer ever recorded, with massive heat dome now drying everything out. I can tell you that it's not just the animals, it's not just the people. The forests that we depend upon for air and oxygen and all of life are collapsing. I can tell you that outside along my street where there are trees, many of the leaves on the trees are burned up and they're starting to look like end of August trees instead of, you know, late June, early July. It's a fantastical hellscape of change. And this is what's coming to the whole planet. Climate collapse is a beast, and we can't continue to allow this to go on. You know, our infrastructure here in the Pacific Northwest is buckling and breaking and falling apart because of the heat. We're not designed. We're designed for, you know, I would say, you know, about 30, 32 heat is what our infrastructure is designed for, because we're very cool and wet and moist climate here traditionally. And now with having this heat, it's buckling. So our electric light rail, which is supposed to be our solution for mass transit rather than cars, failed because of the heat. The power cables melted. Roads are buckling. Bridges are now unstable. This is an incredible dramatic change. And so we weren't prepared for this. And none of us are prepared for what's coming. And so I really feel like we have to understand what's going on. We have to change our perspectives. We have to let go of ego and historic perspectives, and we have to come together as one planet, as one people, and decide first we have to protect the most vulnerable. And that includes people in the tropics and in the global south, and the poor people, people living on the streets, people living in largely indigenous communities around the world, and also in people of color communities in the westernized societies where they don't have air conditioning, they don't have access to clean water, they don't have access, they've been marginalized and put into these zones. We call them, redlining zones in America, put into these zones where, it's not welcome for them to live elsewhere. It's just been an absolute crazy time and a crazy disaster, what we've done with our civilization. And so we have to shift our thinking. We have to shift our priorities. We have to come together and put aside those things we thought we would have for our future and say, this is the future, and we have to do it collectively. We have to do it together. Indigenous peoples have been putting their bodies and their communities on the line for centuries, and now everyone has to. And that's why nonviolent civil disobedience, getting out in the streets, having our voices heard, coming together. And those of us with privilege have to do more. Those of us with privilege of culture or of skin color or of education or of means have to be the ones to step up and sacrifice more, and we have to do it now. There is no time. There's no time left. There's no carbon budget left. There's no someday. It is now. It is today. It is right here, and it is us. And if we don't do it, it won't happen. So we have to talk to ourselves first. We have to talk to our friends, our family, our neighbors. We have to radically change our lifestyles if we haven't already. And we have to be willing to speak, and we have to be willing to be stepping out into the public and be seen for standing for others and standing for the children and standing for all living things and for our future. This is it. There is no better time. There will be no other time. This is us. This is now, and we have to do it. Thank you.